Hello. St. Martin's Day today, so very happy name day to everyone called Martin. Today I've been thinking very much about the rules that St. Benedict puts down for laughter and humour. If anyone's very familiar with the classic Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, I'll try not to give the plot away, but there's a lovely argument between William of Baskerville and the venerable Jorge of Burgos, who is rather irascible and takes St. Benedict very firmly. The fool lifts up his head in laughter. So what about humour? Are Christians just not allowed to be humorous, or is it just miserable old Benedictines? If you've ever tried to tell a joke on Facebook or social media, there's always someone who doesn't get it, or takes what you say literally. That's part and parcel of being human. People have different interpretations of words. And so not everybody's going to understand where you're coming from. That's very hard for people to become aware of. And that's probably part of the problem with humour, particularly the humour that St. Benedict is thinking of. He's thinking of this laughter, this humour that breaks community. Remember that St. Benedict is very focused on keeping a community together. And humour can be divisive. Sometimes it's very difficult to tell a joke without someone taking offence. The days of the joke of an Englishman, Irishman and Scotsman are no longer allowed, as are jokes about one's mother-in-law. That's not always a bad thing. The point of humour is that it is supposed to make people laugh. And if someone is the butt of the joke, that's a division. That's a denigration of someone else. Sometimes we laugh at people falling over and hurting themselves. Sometimes it is laughable, and the person who has fallen over will laugh at themselves. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes if we're laughing to deride or to mock, well, that's not very human. That's not very certainly not very Christian. We do have to be careful with humour. If we're in a community, a Benedictine community or a church community, there are perhaps jokes that one can tell in that community that do make that community laugh, that bind that community together. But it shouldn't be at the expense of someone else. And this is where St. Benedict is really coming from. He wants monks to be grave and sober, so that the world can see that not everything is a laughing matter. But there is joy, there is this thing called joy. and one can laugh in joy. And that is a different matter. Really, we ought to be thinking about how our humour does affect others. Certainly our Lord employs humour. I'm going to tell Herod that fox. Yes. Our Lord is a master of wordplay. He likes a good pun. You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. It's as it should be. He employs humour, a good humour. James and John Boagenes, sons of thunder. So we see there is good humour in our Lord. Laughter is a human response. But to what? Psychologically, humour comes about when we are faced with two opposing ideas that sort of come together. I think one of my favourite jokes is, what is the difference between a duck? One of its legs is both the same. No, you're not meant to understand it. Like some of those wonderful Gary Larson cartoons, you're not meant to understand it. It's the sheer peculiar juxtaposition of things that don't quite make sense. That's okay. But we do need to put laughter in its place. It isn't the be-all and end-all. The joy that God gives is not at the expense of other things, but is the result of hard work of love. There are people out there who are grieving, and we need to mourn with them. But there are people out there who are happy to be alive, and we should rejoice in that. Not only do we mourn for those who have passed, but we rejoice that we ever knew them at all. There is joy there. And why that joy can't really be expressed with laughter, it certainly binds us to the person whom we've lost, and particularly at this time of year when we think of those who have passed, and in particular today, St. Martin's Day, also Remembrance Day, when we remember those who have passed through the atrocities of war. Again, no laughing matter. And I say that, but there are some of our Jewish friends who manage to keep their spirits together by employing humour. And we can even think of, I think it's Father Müller, who was actually shot by the Nazis for making a joke about Hitler. Humour can be a weapon. So we need to be careful. We need to use our humour wisely, gently, occasionally, pointedly, but only at the instruction of God. But we have plenty to laugh at. Certainly will. In heaven, I think there will be a lot of joy and laughter and singing, rejoicing. And I pray that you may see that joy, that rejoicing and laughter. If you are in mourning at this time, if you're remembering loved ones, if you're remembering fallen comrades, the joy is that God has not forgotten them, and that God's remembrance is much more spectacular and wonderful than we can possibly imagine. That's worth smiling about. So, at this time of remembrance, this time of sombre remembrance and thinking, even in the mourning that we have to do for those who have passed, may you find God's joy in your life. And as a nights draw in, may you find that joy in that darkness, in the light of Christ. God bless you. And as always, please, I beg your prayers.